My name is Mia Caldwell. I run a tech company in Berlin, but none of that mattered the day my grandmother looked me in the eye and said, "You have nothing." She didn't know I was the one who had paid for her medication, her caregivers, her estate attorney. So when the lawyer finally stood up in that Florida office and said, "Madam, her company paid for all of this," I didn't say a word. I just reached out and held her trembling hand. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, especially if you've ever been called selfish by the people you were quietly saving. Now let me take you back to where it all began. It was a Tuesday morning in Berlin, cold, gray, and full of meetings stacked back to back. I had just stepped into my glass-walled office near Alexanderplatz, mug of black coffee in hand, when my phone lit up with my mother's name. I hesitated before answering. That hesitation cost me. Mia. "So glad you finally decided to pick up," my mother snapped, without so much as a hello. I sank into my chair. "Hi, Mom, I've got a full day of she's dying," she cut in. "Your grandmother is dying and you're over there living your European dream like it's nothing." I felt the back of my neck tight. "Wait, what's going on? No one told me anything was serious." "Oh, don't pull that," she hissed. "Everyone's been stepping up. Everyone but you. I'm sick of your excuses. You need to come back, now." "I can't just hop on a plane," I said slowly. "Mom, I live here, I run a company, it's not like I'm on vacation," she scoffed. "You've always got an excuse. Work meetings, your big important projects. You know what I think, Mia? I think you just don't care." That hit harder than I wanted to admit. I glanced out the window, the sky dull and heavy over the city skyline. "I do care, you know I care. But I also built a life here. You never supported that, and now you're using it against me." "Oh please," she said, her voice rising. "I knew this would happen the second you left Florida. You were always the selfish one, always thinking you were too good for us." That word, selfish, felt like an old bruise someone had just pressed their thumb into. "You know what's selfish?" I snapped, my calm cracking. "Calling your daughter at 8 a.m. to guilt-trip her across an ocean, without even giving her facts or choices." There was a pause, and for a second I thought maybe we'd take a breath and talk like two adults, but then came the venom. "You weren't here when she fell. You weren't here when she was hospitalized. You don't even know the things we've had to handle. You don't ask. You don't show up." My voice broke without warning. "I send money every month." "And that makes you a saint," she shouted. "Money doesn't hold a hand at the hospital, Mia. Money doesn't change bedpans." "Don't do that," I said quietly. "Don't what?" she barked. "Don't erase what I do just because it doesn't look like what you want it to." She laughed, sharp and cold. "So dramatic, just admit it, you left and never looked back." My heart started pounding. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she twisted the truth like a knife. I closed my eyes, inhaled through my nose, and said flatly, "I can't talk like this." "You never can, because it's not about us, right? It's always about you." That's when I hung up. My hand trembled slightly as I set the phone down. I didn't throw it, I didn't scream. But I did sit in silence, staring at the dark screen. Outside, Berlin kept moving, trams clattered by, emails pinged on my laptop, the day pressed forward. But inside my chest was a riot of guilt, injustice, and something deeper, the sick ache of not being seen for who I really was. No one knew the truth, not my mother, not Harper, not even Grandma. I had built something, quietly, with love. But apparently, all they saw was absence. That night, I would pace my apartment, listening to the radiator clank in the cold and asking myself over and over, am I really the selfish one? Or just the scapegoat? The call ended, but the echo of her words didn't fade. That night, Berlin felt colder than usual. The radiator hissed in the corner of my apartment like it was trying too hard to prove it still worked. I'd been sitting on the edge of my bed for what felt like hours, my laptop open but untouched. The unread messages in my inbox blurred with the reflection of the city lights bouncing off my windows. I couldn't stop replaying the call with my mother. Her voice was still stuck in my ears, like a song I hated but couldn't turn off. "Selfish. You don't care. You don't show up." And the worst part, somewhere deep inside me I had believed her. At least for a moment. The guilt was thick, I could have called more. Visited last Christmas. Reached out when Grandma had her last scare. I told myself I had reasons, tight deadlines, a new investor deal, travel restrictions, but reasons sound a lot like excuses when they're replayed in your own head. So I did what I hadn't done in weeks. I opened the video chat app and hovered over Harper's name. Harper, my baby sister. 7 years younger, still living in Tampa, and always somehow the one who could make Mom laugh. She had this easy way of making herself soft around people. Sweet, simple, relatable. I, on the other hand, had become the one living far away. I hit the call button. It rang, once, twice. Her face appeared on screen, fuzzy at first, then clearer as the camera adjusted. Mia, she squinted, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked like she'd been in bed. I immediately regretted calling. Hey, sorry it's late, I know, I said, brushing hair from my face. No, it's fine. Just wasn't expecting you to call, she said, voice careful. I gave a small smile. Yeah, I know we haven't talked much lately. Yeah, she echoed. The silence stretched for a beat. Then I blurted, I talked to Mom. She said Grandma's really bad. I didn't realize it was that serious. Harper sighed, shifting her phone. She's been in and out, confused a lot. Sometimes she thinks I'm you. That stabbed more than I thought it would. I nodded. I'm sorry, I really am. Things here have been nonstop. Harper tilted her head, not unkindly, but not warmly either. They always are with you. That old defensive heat crept up my neck. I'm not ignoring her. I send money, I check in with the nurse. You just don't show up, she finished quietly. I bit the inside of my cheek. That's not fair. Isn't it? Harper asked, her voice soft but pointed. Mia, when's the last time you actually saw her? Not a photo, not a phone call, in person. I don't remember, I admitted, ashamed. She remembers, Harper said. Or she used to before everything got worse. I swallowed. What does she say? Harper looked away for a moment. She asks about you sometimes. But lately she doesn't mention you much. I think maybe she just stopped expecting. The words landed like a body blow. I know it's hard, Harper added, her voice lightening as if she could backpedal the damage. You've got your company and your whole European life. Don't, I cut in, sharper than I intended. Don't make it sound like I chose Berlin over her. Didn't you? She said, eyes locked on mine through the screen. The room went quiet. I didn't call to fight, I said finally, voice tight. I just wanted to understand what's really going on. Harper leaned back, her expression unreadable. Grandma's dying, Mia. She's old, she's tired, and she's surrounded by people who show up. That's what's really going on. I wanted to scream, to explain, to pour out everything I've done behind the scenes. But there was no room for that kind of nuance. Not here, not with her. Okay, I said quietly. Thanks for picking up. Mia, she started, but I was already reaching for the red button. Good night, I said, and ended the call. The apartment fell silent again. Only the distant hum of the streetcars rolling through Mitt below. I stared at my dim reflection in the black laptop screen. Maybe they were right. Maybe I had become the distant one. The ghost sister. Daughter who sends wire transfers but never hugs anyone. But I wasn't heartless. I wasn't cold. I'd been trying to survive in a life I built from nothing. I had clawed my way up from borrowed student loans and gray hostels and 14-hour coding sprints. And somewhere along the way, I became invisible to the people I had left behind. That night, lying in bed with eyes wide open, I made a decision. If they wanted to believe I didn't care, fine. I would prove otherwise. Not with words. Not with calls, but with action. The kind of action that couldn't be traced back to me. The kind that didn't need applause. If they wanted a miracle, I'd give them one, quietly. Berlin's winter light is thin, watery, and cold, like it's apologizing for showing up at all. By 7 a.m., I hadn't slept a wink. I sat in my kitchen, fingers wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold, staring out the window at the skyline that once made me feel proud. Now it just felt far away. Disconnected. My phone buzzed with meeting reminders. A product roadmap review at 10, onboarding call at noon, investor Q&A at 3. I stared at the calendar, then closed the app. No, today wasn't for projections or press releases. Today was for something real. I opened my laptop and clicked into a folder I hadn't touched in months, one marked Exit Strategy. It had been a quiet project. Notes on what it might look like to sell a piece of my tech startup, Nexaloop, to a strategic partner. Back then, it was about future planning, a 5-year dream. Now it was a necessity, not because I needed the money, but because they did. Because Grandma, who once slipped me 20s when Mom wasn't looking and whispered, "For your dreams, baby," deserved more than second-hand care and whispered complaints from exhausted relatives. Because I was tired of waiting for recognition. If I couldn't be seen, I'd still serve. Quietly. Thoroughly. Within minutes, I was drafting a message to Johans, my legal advisor. 10 years older than me, meticulous, discreet, and always 3 steps ahead. Mia Caldwell, need to sell 15% equity in Nexaloop. Private sale, non-voting, Use my secondary trust account for the transfer, and I need help starting a nonprofit. Health-focused, Florida-based, anonymous ownership. Call me ASAP. He responded in 2 words, understood. Zoom in 20. By the time his face appeared on screen, framed by mahogany bookshelves and a snowy window in Zurich, I already had the name in my notebook. Sunlight Aid. Because if there was one thing my grandmother always said, especially when I'd cry on her porch swing as a kid, it was this. You don't need the world's approval, sweetheart. You just need to be a little sunlight for someone in the dark. 15%, Johans asked, eyebrows raised. You've been offered double that valuation for just 10. I don't want to wait for the perfect deal, I replied resolute. I want the fastest clean transfer. Someone aligned with the mission, no interference, no management rights. He nodded. I know just the buyer. Impact investor out of Stockholm, quiet, efficient. And the nonprofit? I asked, already opening a blank document for the bylaws. Johans adjusted his glasses. I'll draft articles of incorporation today. We'll list a third-party administrator as the face of the charity, route all funds through a shell trust. Your name won't appear anywhere. Perfect, I said, heart thudding. He paused, watching me. Mia, is this about recognition or revenge? I smiled faintly. Neither, it's about peace and control, he nodded slowly. And the name? Sunlight Aid, I said. Keep it soft, not flashy. I want the website to look like it's been around forever, grassroots, local. He chuckled. You've already visualized the landing page, haven't you? Of course I have, I said, scribbling mock-up notes in the margin. Warm colors, photos of caregivers, no donation button, just a simple need help form. And services, medical bills, home care, meals, anything small that makes life easier. And this is for your grandmother, he asked gently. I looked away from the screen for a moment. It's for her, but also for me. He didn't press, that's why I trusted him. By noon, the paperwork was in motion. The equity transfer would take a few weeks to close, but Johans assured me he'd front the seed funds to get Sunlight Aid operational within days. I spent the rest of the day building the infrastructure, contacting a quiet design firm in Orlando I knew from a hackathon last year, outlining the branding, mapping out an internal dashboard for anonymous support approvals. My fingers flew across the keyboard with more clarity than I'd felt in months. For the first time in years, my skills weren't about product-market fit or Series B metrics. They were about dignity. Dignity for a woman who once knitted me a scarf every year like it was a sacred ritual. Dignity for a generation that raised us while we rushed ahead. And dignity, maybe, for the version of me that still wished for someone back home to say, you matter. At 8:42 p.m., I clicked send on the final approval request for the Florida registration. Then I sat back in the chair, exhausted but calm. Outside, the Berlin sky had gone from steel to black. Inside, something brighter stirred. I wasn't waiting for their forgiveness anymore. I wasn't begging to be seen. I was building something that would speak for me, louder than any apology, clearer than any fight. And no one had to know. A week later, the silence broke. It was a Thursday evening when I noticed the shift. I was standing in my kitchen, pouring myself a glass of Riesling after a long strategy meeting when my phone lit up. The family group chat, normally a quiet thread filled with forwarded recipes and blurry photos of the dog, was buzzing like a hive disturbed. I opened the thread and scrolled. Aunt June, did you guys hear? Mom's new prescriptions were approved. Like instantly. That arthritis treatment she's needed for months, covered. Harper, and did you see the nurse rotation? There's a whole new care team now. All certified, and they actually show up on time. Uncle Ray, wait, who arranged all this? Medicare doesn't move this fast. Aunt June, we thought she was going to lose the house if we couldn't get some support. And now suddenly she has a nutritionist. This feels like I don't know. A miracle. I leaned against the counter, heart pounding, phone held loosely in my hand. There it was. The moment I'd been waiting for. No press release. No name, no credit, just results. I let the conversation unfold, scrolling past their awe and confusion, watching as they tried to piece together the impossible. And then came the inevitable message. Harper, did someone help her behind the scenes? I took a sip of my wine, breathing in the silence of my apartment. Then, with careful fingers, I typed, Mia, that's wonderful news. She deserves to be comfortable, just that, nothing more, and I left the chat. I could practically hear the virtual side eyes, the curiosity, the whispers behind the screen. But none of it mattered, because the balance had started to shift, and I was the one tipping it. The funding had been routed through a local Florida foundation that partnered with small nonprofits, exactly as I'd planned. The administrator, a retired woman named Carla who ran everything from her guest room, had called me in disbelief when the wire arrived. "I've never seen this much in one transfer," she'd said. "You sure you don't want your name anywhere on this?" "Positive," I'd said. Carla had smiled softly. "Then let's do some good." And she had. Within 72 hours, my grandmother's prescriptions had been paid in full, direct billing arranged through Sunlight Aid's newly established healthcare liaison. 2 days later, a vetted care team arrived at the door, a rotation of kind, licensed professionals trained in geriatric care. Meals were delivered the following Monday, Southern-style comfort food, nothing too fancy, just warm and familiar, and every step of it. She never knew it came from me. I didn't need her to. I just needed her to feel taken care of for once without having to plead or settle. Back in Berlin, I watched it all unfold from the glow of my laptop. Emails from Carla with reports and receipts. Notes from the nurse logged through our custom dashboard. The backend of Sunlight Aid's system pinged softly each time a task was completed. The platform was working. And so was I. I took a breath. The first real one in days. For so long, I'd believed justice only came when people knew what you'd done. That the only way to change their perception was to confront them with proof, stand in front of them and scream, "I matter." But now, there was something more powerful in this. In watching them squint into the light and ask, "Who made this happen?" and knowing the answer didn't need to be spoken. Later that night, I sat curled on the couch with my laptop still open. The Berlin skyline blinked quietly outside, tall and still. A notification popped up. "Harper," privately this time. "Harper, I keep thinking about what you said the other night. Maybe I was too harsh, maybe we've all been too harsh." I stared at the message. No apology, but something near it, a crack in the narrative. I typed a response, then deleted it. Instead, I just wrote, "Mia, let's focus on Grandma right now. She needs the peace." I closed the laptop. In that quiet moment, I let myself feel it, not pride exactly, not satisfaction, just relief. I had found a way to love her without needing to be loved back in return. I had given them the help they never thought I was capable of. And maybe, just maybe, I had started to rewrite the story they told themselves about me. Not with speeches, not with apologies, with action, with sunlight. The next morning I woke early. Not because of meetings or alarms, but because I felt hopeful. Hope had been missing from my life lately, quietly replaced with numbness and tightly wound restraint. But after the response to Sunlight Aid, the prescriptions, the caregivers, the stunned family group chat, I felt something stir again. Maybe this was the moment. Maybe I had earned the right to reach out. Maybe, just maybe, she would hear my voice and know I had never truly left. I made tea, soft peppermint to steady my nerves, and stared at my phone. Her number was still saved under Grandma B, the only person who had ever used my full name with pride, never criticism. "You were named after your great Aunt Mabel," she used to say, a woman who wore red lipstick and read the newspaper out loud every morning. Smart as a whip, didn't take nonsense from anyone. I tapped the call button before I could overthink it. It rang longer than I expected. Long enough that I almost ended the call, then a familiar voice answered. "Yes," my throat tightened. "Hi, Grandma, it's me, Mia." A pause. "Oh, hello, dear." Not my Mia, not baby girl, just dear. I forced a small smile, even though she couldn't see me. "I just wanted to hear your voice. Harper said you've been resting more lately." "Yes," she replied. "I've been very tired, but the nurses are kind. They bring me tea with lemon, just how I like it." I swallowed. "I'm glad to hear that. You sound strong." She gave a vague, noncommittal hum. "Some days are better than others." Another pause. I scrambled. "I think about you a lot." Berlin's cold, but the magnolias back home must be starting to bud already. She didn't respond to that. Not with nostalgia or questions or even curiosity. Instead, she said, "Thank you for calling, dear. I'm resting now." And just like that, the line went dead. No goodbye, no "I miss you," no warmth. I stared at my phone, still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence that now filled the space where her voice had been. My chest tightened, the hope draining like water through a sieve. After everything, after the quiet sacrifice, after the care she was now receiving, after all the years of love I never stopped carrying, she still held me at a distance. I wasn't the granddaughter who visited. I wasn't the one who sat beside her bed or braided her hair or made tea with lemon. I was a voice in a different time zone. an afterthought, and she had closed the door with a soft but unmistakable click. I set the phone down slowly, careful not to let it clatter. For a long time I didn't move. The Berlin apartment, usually my sanctuary, suddenly felt sterile. My modern gray furniture, once so sleek, felt cold. The muted hum of traffic outside made the walls feel thinner than they were. I had wanted to believe that doing good, even anonymously, would earn me connection. That somehow the love I was pouring into action would make its way back through invisible channels. That she would feel it and know without being told. But she didn't. And maybe she never would. That night I didn't eat. I sat at my desk and opened the Sunlight Aid dashboard again just to remind myself something meaningful existed. I read the latest caregiver logs. I approved 2 more service requests. I paid another medical invoice. I worked in silence, not for applause, but because it was the only place I still felt useful. When I finally closed my laptop, it was nearly midnight. The lights of Berlin stretched out beyond the window, indifferent. I lay in bed with the covers pulled high, the echo of her voice still in my ears. "Thank you for calling, dear, I'm resting now." And as I drifted off into a restless sleep, one truth pressed in like weight on my chest. Sometimes, even love, quiet, sacrificial, steadfast love, is not enough to change the story other people have written about you. The boardroom smelled like espresso and glass cleaner, sterile, focused, unforgiving. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the 15th floor conference room, cutting across sleek metal chairs and casting pale rectangles onto the long oak table. Normally, I loved these meetings. They were the arena where strategy met precision, where I could feel the gears of my company clicking forward, powered by logic and ambition. But not today. I sat at the head of the table, hands folded, face composed, while our CFO droned on about Q1 projections. He was saying all the right things: growth percentages, new acquisition potential, expanding user base, but I couldn't hear a word of it. My eyes kept drifting to the frost-edged window behind him. Berlin below looked like a miniature city made of ash and steel, distant, removed, just like me. And that brings us to the retention numbers for enterprise clients, Marco, our COO, said, tapping his tablet with too much energy. I blinked, dragging my focus back. Right, yes, please go on. I felt his eyes on me. Marco had been with me since the beginning, back when Nexaloop was just an idea pitched in a basement co-working space over cheap beer and over-caffeinated ambition. He knew me better than most, maybe too well. After a pause, he leaned toward me slightly, voice lowered. "Are you okay?" I forced a small smile, the kind that never quite reaches the eyes. "Just tired." He nodded slowly, not pushing but not convinced. The others continued talking, product leads, data analysts, the head of partnerships, but it all blurred. I nodded in the right places, gave 1 or 2 approving murmurs, but my mind was elsewhere. "Thank you for calling, dear, I'm resting now." That voice again, cold and restrained, replaying in my head like an echo I couldn't mute. A week ago, I'd built a miracle. I had moved mountains of legal paperwork, startup funds, anonymous structures, and digital platforms to build something tangible for someone I loved. And still, the distance between us was as sharp as ever. What was the point of fixing someone's world if you were still invisible in it? "Mia," I turned, startled. Everyone at the table was staring at me. Marco cleared his throat gently. "We're ready to vote on the Madrid expansion. You with us?" I straightened in my chair. "Of course." I cleared my throat. "Approved." The team murmured their agreement, and the meeting continued, but I knew they'd seen it, cracks in the armor. Afterward, as the others filtered out with laptops under arms and post-meeting chatter, Marco hung back. He waited until the room emptied, then walked over to where I was gathering my things. "You've been off," he said plainly. "Not just today, a while now." I didn't deny it. I just zipped my laptop case and said, "It's personal." "Do you need to go home?" He asked, and I knew he meant Florida. "We can handle things here." I hesitated. The idea of returning walking into the same house where I'd always been viewed as a guest in my own family made my stomach twist. "I'm not sure that would help," I admitted. "Being closer doesn't mean being seen." He studied me. "You don't have to explain, but if you need time, take it. The company can function without you for a bit." That was the part that stung the most. It could. It would. Everyone was replaceable. Even here, even me. I thanked him, murmured something about checking in tomorrow, and walked out of the room. The hallway outside was quiet. I stepped into the elevator alone and watched the door slide shut, reflecting a distorted version of my face, flawless, poised, unreadable. As the floors ticked down, I felt it again. That same emptiness. Not because I had failed, but because even success, loud, shiny, hard-earned success, couldn't fill the places where connection should have lived. And today, the city outside the glass walls wasn't just cold. It felt indifferent. By the end of that week, sleep became a stranger. I would lie in my Berlin apartment staring at the ceiling, the faint glow of streetlights stretching across the plaster like prison bars. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in Florida, back in my grandmother's kitchen. I could almost smell the cinnamon rolls she used to bake on Sunday mornings. I'd sit at her small wooden table, legs too short to reach the floor, swinging back and forth while she hummed old country songs. "Mia Caldwell," she would say, tapping my nose with flour-dusted fingers, "you've got a brain like lightning, don't let anyone dim it." Back then she saw me, but memory has a cruel edge, because right behind that sweetness came another voice, my mother's. "Stop correcting everyone, Mia, you don't always have to be right. Don't make Harper feel bad just because you get better grades. Why do you have to be so intense?" I'd learned early that shrinking was safer. That excellence was impressive, but only from a distance. Up close, it made people uncomfortable. Now, decades later, I was still shrinking, still proving my worth in silence. At 3:17 a.m., I gave up trying to sleep and reached for my phone. There was only one person I trusted with the truth: Noel. Noel Carter had been my best friend since university in Munich. Brilliant, sarcastic, and unafraid to call me out. She now served as our chief product officer, but before that, she had been the girl who split ramen packets with me in a shared dorm and believed in Nexaloop before it even had a name. I hesitated for half a second. Then I called. She answered on the third ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Mia, is Berlin on fire or are you spiraling again?" I let out a shaky laugh. "Maybe both." There was rustling on her end. "Talk to me." And I did. I told her everything: the call with my mother, Harper's quiet accusation, Grandma's polite dismissal. I told her about Sunlight Aid, about the anonymous funding, about how none of it had changed the distance I felt. When I finished, there was silence. Not awkward silence, thinking silence. "You built an entire nonprofit in a week," she finally said. "Sold equity, rewired a healthcare system. You're still asking if you're selfish." "It doesn't feel like enough," I whispered. "That's because you're trying to earn love like it's a performance bonus," she replied gently. "You can't KPI your way into someone's heart." I closed my eyes. "Then what do I do?" I asked. Another pause. "If this is breaking you," she said slowly, "maybe it's time to go back." My eyes snapped open. "Back, to Florida, to them, to the mess. You can't fix a narrative from another continent forever." I sat up in bed. "I can't just leave. Nexaloop." "I'll run it," she cut in. I blinked. "What?" "I'll step in as interim CEO. You've trained me for this. Marco can handle operations. The board trusts us. Go face your family." The offer hung in the air like something fragile and priceless. "You do that?" I asked quietly. "Mia," she said, her voice softening, "I would have done it years ago if you'd asked. You don't have to carry everything alone." Emotion rose fast and hot in my chest. I swallowed hard. "I don't even know what I'd say when I get there," I admitted. "Then don't rehearse it," Noel replied. "Just show up. For once, let them see you without the armor." The idea terrified me. Berlin had become my fortress, my proof, my shield. Florida was history, vulnerable, complicated. But maybe she was right. Maybe I couldn't keep sending sunlight from across an ocean and expect it to warm me back. "Would you really do that for me?" I asked again, needing to hear it. "Yes," she said firmly. "Book the flight." For the first time in weeks, something inside me shifted. Not from pain, not from pride, but from possibility. Maybe I didn't need to stay invisible to be strong. Maybe showing up was the bravest thing left to do. As the call ended and dawn began to creep pale and quiet over Berlin, I sat in the growing light with a decision forming. The city outside no longer felt like a shield. It felt like a place I might need to leave, at least for a while. And for the first time, that thought didn't terrify me. It felt like a step. The night before my flight, Noel showed up at my door with takeout, 2 suitcases, and a checklist color-coded like a battle plan. "If you're stepping out of the cockpit," she said, "you better believe I'm keeping this plane flying." We sat on my living room floor, eating Thai food and dividing CEO tasks like we were organizing a wedding. For the first time, I let someone else hold the reins. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. That morning, I boarded a direct flight to Tampa with a coat too heavy for Florida and a heart weighed down by things I couldn't pack neatly into a suitcase: old memories, half-buried wounds, and hope so fragile it felt like glass in my chest. 8 hours in the air gave me space to rehearse what I might say to Grandma. I'd imagined the conversation 100 ways. Would she be surprised to see me? Would she know deep down that I was the one who'd helped her? I glanced at the clouds beyond the oval window, absently sipping lukewarm coffee when my phone buzzed. It was Harper. I unlocked it, already wary. Harper, FYI, Grandma's estate planning meeting is this week. She's finalizing her will. Then another message. A forwarded screenshot of a group text. Aunt June, Uncle Ray, Harper. Everyone was listed. Everyone but me. And below that, Harper's follow-up. Harper, she said it's just for family. I didn't know how to respond to that. My stomach dropped. Just for family. I read it again, the words as sharp as glass. She hadn't meant for me to see it. That much was clear. But Harper, whether out of guilt or some sliver of loyalty, had sent it anyway. I stared at the seat in front of me as the plane hummed through the sky. Excluded. Again. This time not from a party or a vacation or a holiday call. This time from the final act, the last declaration of who mattered and who didn't. It didn't matter that I had paid for the estate lawyer. That Sunlight aide had covered the medications, the house nurse, the grocery deliveries. That I had sold part of my company to make it all happen. To her, I still wasn't family. I was the one who left. The one who didn't visit. The one who, despite everything, still didn't belong. The flight attendant passed with a cart of pretzels and water bottles. I waved her off. Instead, I closed my eyes and leaned back into the headrest. A quiet resolve filled the hollow space in my chest. She doesn't want me there, but I'm going anyway. Not for a seat at the table, not for recognition. I was going because the truth had a right to stand in the room even if no one looked at it. I whispered into the hum of the cabin. I'll go anyway, I need to. Outside the window, the clouds thinned and the land below grew clearer. Florida was waiting. So was the reckoning. The Florida sun was sharp, too bright for February. It bounced off every car hood and storefront, making the world feel overexposed, like a scene I wasn't meant to walk into. The law office sat tucked between a yoga studio and a family-run bakery. Polished glass doors, white columns, trying hard to look more genteel than it was. I stood outside for a moment, clutching my purse a little too tightly before pushing through the door. Inside, cool air and the smell of lemon cleaner wrapped around me. The receptionist glanced up and did a double take. "Can I help you?" "I'm here for the Caldwell estate meeting," I said calmly, like I belonged. She gave a slow nod, eyes flicking to her screen. "They're already gathered, down the hall, last door on the left." "Thanks," I murmured. My heels clicked against the tile as I walked toward that door. I could already hear them, murmured voices, the shuffling of papers, a laugh that sounded like Aunt June's trying to sound casual. I took a breath. Then I opened the door and stepped in. 8 heads turned. The reaction was instant. Harper froze. Aunt June stiffened. Uncle Ray looked like he'd swallowed something sour. "She came all this way," someone whispered, loud enough for me to hear, quiet enough to pretend they hadn't meant to. I didn't acknowledge them. I didn't apologize or smile or ask if there was a seat for me. I simply walked to the back of the room and took the last empty chair by the wall. It didn't creak when I sat. I made sure of it. Grandma was seated near the front, beside the attorney, Mr. Denton. I remembered now. The same man who used to send her birthday cards in blue envelopes. She didn't look at me, not once. Her silver hair was swept back in a neat chignon, her sweater soft and lavender. Her face was calm, unreadable, as if I were a stranger who had wandered into the wrong waiting room. Mr. Denton cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" There were nods. Shuffling. The room adjusted. But no one said a word to me. The tone was civil, even polite. The words were businesslike. No one raised voices, no one hissed insults, but every glance was a story. Every tight smile was a verdict. I sat still, hands folded in my lap. Let them think I didn't belong. Let them wonder why I was there, because this time I wouldn't explain myself. I didn't come to beg or to argue or to stake a claim. I came to witness. To see, finally, how it would all unfold when the curtain lifted. And whether the truth would step into the light on its own, or if it would need a gentle push. The room felt smaller as Mr. Denton began reading. Legal language has a rhythm to it, measured, detached, almost soothing if you don't listen too closely. Names were mentioned. Assets outlined. The house, the savings accounts. The jewelry, small bequests, larger ones. I sat in the back, barely breathing. Grandma listened with a faint, distant expression. Her hands rested on the table, thin and pale against the polished wood. Once or twice she nodded. Once or twice she corrected the attorney about a date. And then, as if remembering something suddenly important, she turned her head slightly. Her eyes finally found me. The air shifted. "Well," she said slowly, her voice clear despite the years. "It seems everyone has built something of value." There were approving murmurs around the table. "Harper with her nursing degree," she continued. "Your cousin Daniel and his medical practice. Even Claire's bakery is doing well." Aunt June smiled proudly. Then Grandma's gaze lingered on me, cool and assessing. "And some," she added, "have nothing, unlike your successful cousins." A sharp ripple of laughter broke out, small, awkward but unmistakable. Harper let out a breathy chuckle she tried to disguise as a cough. Aunt June's lips twitched. I felt the words hit before I fully processed them. Nothing, not distant, not absent, not misunderstood, nothing. My hands trembled in my lap. I pressed them together to steady them, staring down at my fingers as if they belonged to someone else. The old instinct rose in me, the one that said, "Stay quiet. Don't make a scene, don't correct her, don't embarrass anyone." I could have walked out, I could have stayed silent. Instead, I stood. The movement scraped softly against the floor. Every head turned again. Without saying a word, I walked forward. Slowly. I stopped beside her chair. Moment, I simply looked at her, the woman who once told me I had lightning in my mind. The woman who now believed I was empty. Then gently I reached for her hand. Her skin was cool, fragile. She stiffened slightly, surprised. "Grandma," I said quietly, not for the room but for her. "I'm here." The room fell silent. Mr. Denton shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. "Madam," he said carefully, glancing between us. "Before we continue, there is a matter that needs clarification." Grandma frowned faintly. "What matter?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses and opened a separate folder. "The funding for your medical care, the private nurses, your prescriptions, and this estate planning process itself." He paused. "They were not covered by Medicare or by family contributions." A ripple of confusion passed around the table. Uncle Ray leaned forward. "Then who?" Mr. Denton looked directly at my grandmother. "Madam, her company paid for all of this. The medications, the caregivers, the home support, even my retainer fee for your estate planning." The words hung in the air like a dropped glass that hadn't shattered yet. Silence, thick, absolute. Harper's face drained of color. Aunt June blinked rapidly. "What?" Mr. Denton continued, calm and precise. "The funds were transferred through a registered nonprofit entity. However, the originating capital was traced to a partial equity sale of Nexaloop Technologies, owned by Ms. Mia Caldwell." Every eye turned to me. Not with dismissal, not with laughter, but with shock. Grandma's hand trembled inside mine. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I swallowed the knot in my throat. "I know," I said softly. The laughter from moments ago felt obscene now, echoing in the stunned quiet. No speeches, no raised voices, just the truth, sitting plainly in the middle of the room where no one could ignore it anymore. And for the first time since I'd walked into that office, I didn't feel invisible. I felt undeniable. The silence after the revelation didn't just fill the room, it pressed down on it. Harper's eyes were wide with disbelief. Aunt June opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. Even Uncle Ray, usually full of bluster and opinion, seemed frozen in place. But my grandmother, she looked at our joined hands like they didn't belong to her. Her eyes slowly lifted to mine. "I didn't know," she said, voice soft and shaken. "I didn't know it came from you." Her hand trembled in mine. I felt the fragility in her bones, the same hands that once braided my hair, now trembling with disbelief. Why didn't you say anything?" she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I took a breath. This moment, this exact moment, had lived in my mind 100 different ways. I'd imagined yelling, vindication, silence. But when it came, the words were quiet. "Because I wanted to give," I said. "Not prove." Her lips parted, but no words came. I kept my voice gentle. "I didn't want applause, I just wanted you to be okay." And with that, something in her broke. Her chin quivered and the tears spilled freely now. She turned her face slightly, covering her mouth with her free hand like the weight of shame was too much to bear. "I was so wrong about you," she said, barely audible. "I listened to the wrong people. I didn't see you." My throat burned, but I held her hand tighter. "You didn't want to," I replied honestly. "But that doesn't matter now." She looked at me then, truly looked. The grandmother I remembered flickered behind her sorrow, behind the veil of age and disappointment and too many whispered assumptions. Mia, she began, then turned toward Mr. Denton. Change the documents. The room stirred. I want the house to go to Mia, she said, louder now. She's the one who earned it. She's the one who gave without expecting anything. My heart clenched not from joy but from the sheer unfairness of this sudden reversal. I looked around the room, at Harper's guilt, at Aunt June's shock, at the fragile remorse sitting on my grandmother's shoulders, and knew what I had to do. I shook my head. No, I said gently, keep the house. She blinked. Mia, let it be a guest home, I continued, voice steady. For the whole family, for visitors, for healing, not for claiming. The words surprised even me, but as I said them I felt something lift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but freedom. This wasn't about ownership, I said, it was about dignity. Mr. Denton cleared his throat. I can make those changes, of course. I turned to him and nodded. Call it the Magnolia House. My grandmother always loved those trees. She let out a sound, half laugh, half sob. You remembered that? I looked at her with a soft smile. I remember everything. And in that moment, I didn't need to be written into the will, because I had already rewritten the story. 3 months passed, and with them a quiet blooming of something I hadn't expected to feel again. Peace. The house, once a symbol of division and silence, was now alive in a new way. We called it the Magnolia House, just as I had asked, and we made it into something open. Soft, shared. The walls were repainted in pale creams and warm honey tones. A ramp was added out front for easier access, and the back garden, once overgrown and forgotten, was trimmed and replanted with magnolia trees, their blossoms just beginning to open with the spring. There were no family portraits on the wall, no plaques, no dedications. That was intentional. This wasn't about ownership. It was about presence. Aunt June visited with her grandkids on Sundays. Uncle Ray helped install a new screened-in porch without complaining. Even Harper came by with takeout some evenings, quieter now, less certain, but trying. The silence between us had softened. And my grandmother, she got stronger, her voice steadied. Her hands trembled less. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me when she thought I wasn't looking, studying me, maybe seeing something new, or maybe just finally seeing what was always there. I had shifted into a rhythm I never expected, half businesswoman, half Floridian granddaughter. I took early morning Zoom calls from the kitchen, ran team meetings from the old sunroom with birds chirping outside, and then stepped out onto the porch for long, gentle afternoons. And it was on one of those afternoons, with sweet tea in hand and the magnolias just beginning to scatter petals across the lawn, that she finally said it. You healed more than me, Mia. I turned my head. She was rocking slowly in the chair beside mine, wearing a light cardigan, her hair pinned back neatly. I blinked. What do you mean? Her eyes stayed forward, but her voice was steady. I spent years thinking love had to be loud, immediate, easy to spot. You showed me that sometimes it's silent, patient, and stitched in action. I smiled faintly. That's how you were once, with me, she nodded, slow and sure. And I forgot it somewhere along the way. Let others tell me who you were, I'm sorry for that. I didn't rush to fill the silence. The apology was enough. The tea was warm, the air was soft. Across the porch railing, I could see one of the nurses setting up a picnic table for an incoming family, cousins visiting from out of town. They'd asked to stay at the Magnolia House because it felt like home. That was the only legacy I needed. I never wanted the house, I said quietly. I just didn't want to be erased. You never were, she replied, her eyes finally meeting mine. We just needed a little sunlight to see clearly again. We rocked in silence for a while. Not everything was fixed. Not every relationship was healed. But something sacred had returned, dignity, maybe, mutual recognition, peace. And under the wide arms of the magnolia tree it was enough. 2 years later my life is lived in 2 languages, 2 time zones, and 2 very different worlds. I spend half the year in Berlin, consulting quietly for tech startups and mentoring young women who remind me so much of the girl I once was, hungry, sharp, and underestimated. The other half I spend in Florida, tucked into a rhythm that feels more like healing than hustle. Sunlight Aid has grown into something much bigger than I imagined, still anonymous, still quiet, but now local nurses know it by name. Caregivers recommend it without even knowing where the money comes from, and I like it that way. Back in Florida, the Magnolia House has become a resting place, not just for family, but for connection. People pass through for holidays, recovery, reconnection. No one owns it, yet somehow we all belong to it. And every Sunday afternoon, without fail, my grandmother and I sit under the wide magnolia tree with a chessboard between us. She plays with the same focus she used to reserve for crossword puzzles. I let her win more often than not, though some days she catches me off guard. I still don't know how you managed all of it, she said last Sunday, placing a bishop down with quiet satisfaction. I didn't manage, I told her. I just showed up differently. She smiled at that. Well, however you showed up, you changed everything. We don't talk about the will, or the old silences, or the laughter that once cut so deep. We don't have to. The magnolia blooms are wide this year, their scent sweet and steady, and under their shade we play in peace, knowing now that love, once rooted, will always find a way to rise. That was the end of my story. But something still lingers in my mind. Harper knew I wasn't invited to the will reading, and she sent me that message anyway. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was love, but it changed everything. Do you think she did the right thing? Or have you ever been in her shoes? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story made you feel something real.